It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Hope you had a great weekend. Why wouldn't you not have had a great weekend? It was your last weekend to relax and do all the little chores around the house, cut the grass, trim the hedges, say hello to the wife and kids. And now, with football practice set to begin in the state of South Carolina for the colleges and across the country the end of this week, it's time to get really serious about the football season. The Panthers are going at it up in Spartanburg. They have lost another starter to an injury. We'll tell you about that. Of course, the high school kids are already practicing. We have scrimmages coming up later on this week. What a run of a few days in recruiting for Clemson. If you have not been paying attention, 5 commitments coming out of the all-in cookout for the Tigers. We'll talk about that in a moment in detail. Phil Kornblut here from downtown Columbia with the Professor Tom Hayes and Will Pelagic back from – this is really like your first official vacation away from Sports Talk.
It was. It was a true unplug. I listened to y'all the entire last week. I was a little jealous because I picked the wrong week to go on vacation because y'all talked about everything from football to people stripping and all kinds of crazy stuff this past week. But a much needed refresh, and I'm ready for football, man. You were right. This is the prime time. This is why we do this, and it feels like New Year's Day today with football starting here later on this week.
Absolutely. 800-956-7266 is our phone number. Email talkback at sportstalksc.com, on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. We are really wide open tonight for your phone calls, your thoughts about the beginning of practice. Our poll question on our website, sportstalksc.com, is which team will be the most dangerous one for Clemson on the schedule this year? The one the Tigers should be most concerned about. I think we worded it this way. The way we worded it was treacherous. Now, what was here we go. Scariest. The scariest opponent on the Clemson schedule: Texas A&M, Georgia Tech, NC State, Florida State, Louisville, or USC. You got 6 picks there, and most of the votes have come in thus far for South Carolina.
You neglected mine, which would be a write-in pick, which would be Boston College.
Thought about that, and it's up there. It's late in the year. I know BC has got the player of the year.
My number 2 pick in the ACC Atlantic, Boston College.
But do you think, in November, it could be a little wintry up there by the time the Tigers get up there, which could make a difference in that game.
And Boston College last year, their young players are a year older, and they've got to be buoyed by their performance at least for 3.5 quarters in Death Valley. So and they found a little bit of offense to go with that defense.
I was going to say,
and arguably the best running back in the ACC as far as a bell cow running back is concerned.
Yeah, and that's the thing that concerns me is the fact that was a 7-7 game in the 4th quarter in Death Valley. And I'm not saying that Clemson will lose that game. I just think they're better than Florida State. I think they're better than Texas A&M. And I think that where that game is in that point of the season, you got 2 very, very tough games against Duke at home and South Carolina at home. I'm not saying it's a potential look-ahead game or a potential sleeper game, but I just feel like that kind of sits in the range of the games that Clemson has lost in the regular season last couple of years. Think about Pittsburgh, think about Syracuse. Boston College kind of fits that mold. Not a team that really necessarily is bad, but one that obviously can potentially slip you up.
So the one game that you think Clemson could stub its toe is BC up there.
Yes.
Yeah. Next week, we'll do the Gamecocks' most scariest opponent on the schedule. Then we can talk about it here on the show, but that'll be the poll question for next week. I'm set up for 2 weeks of poll questions with this one and next week.
I think that the answer to that question is easy if you well, I would say it's
you got Georgia.
I would say it could be easy.
Clemson?
It could be easy depending on whether you limit it to just the conference opponents or if you open it all up. But again, I think
it's everybody on the schedule.
That question is pretty much easily answered by the team that wears orange.
Well, is there a big difference when you look at them right now? Is there big difference between Georgia and Clemson, except USC gets Georgia at home, they get Clemson on the road.
I don't think those are the scariest opponents.
Oh.
The scariest opponent is Kentucky. There's no doubt about it.
The
mental block. Because it's
Mr. Cerebral over here.
Anytime a team you think is better than you are, mentally that doesn't affect you because you want to see yourself against the best. It's the one that has the hex on you that scares you. And Kentucky is the one that has the hex on because of the game they should win.
This has to be the year it ends, doesn't it?
One would think, but again, I think Kentucky and Florida, I think Kentucky thought last year was going to be the year that ended, and it didn't. Look, South Carolina, when they go to Kentucky, they've just got to play much better football. They've never, well, I'm not going to say never, but in recent years, they have struggled offensively up there, and they have struggled in stopping Kentucky's running game for whatever reason. They have just lined up one way or another, whether it was the Wildcat or something else. They had a hot running back against South Carolina, and then they had the hot quarterback the last 2 years as well, the junior college guy who's gone now. They just have found, it's funny, matchups are oftentimes overlooked. Some teams just don't match up well with other teams. Maybe this is a case for whatever reason South Carolina is losing that matchup battle.
I think South Carolina, there are two games I can remember where South Carolina's youth did not prepare them to be resilient. First, Kentucky lost, and it's not in a row, but the first time Marcus Lattimore injured his ankle and was out of the game and could not get back in, and it was almost like the team just went, Last year, a young South Carolina team, Debo's carted off. Oh, my goodness. And then suddenly, psychologically, I think that affected the team. I think this year, with more veteran players, an injury, even though one that may be devastating, will not mentally affect the team as much as it has in the past.
That 4-game stretch after the Marshall game, and obviously having gone through the Georgia emotional game that will be on the September 8th, you have at Vanderbilt, at Kentucky, home Missouri, home A&M. There's no reason you can't expect 4-0 out of that stretch.
3-1, 4-0. I think anything
less than 3-1 is just
is a big disappointment. Yeah.
But I think you can expect 4-0 if this South Carolina offense is what we expect it to be, and if you expect them to reach their highest peak, which could be a contender for the SEC East, depending on how things go September 8th.
One of the things that Muschamp has not had in his short tenure at South Carolina is an offensive line when they have a lead. Here you go, take the ball and run it and try to stop us, meaning nursing a lead. It seems like every game that South Carolina plays is close.
Right.
If they get a lead now and that defense can turn the football over like they did last year, and now you got a stud offensive line in the middle that can open up holes down the middle, that could bode well down the stretch for South Carolina.
We're missing the big story of the entire weekend, though. And this overshadows everything else that we've touched on to this point.
What's that?
No more balloons at Clemson football games.
Yeah, can we stop down on this? Is about turtles. This is about saving the turtles.
Listen,
come on.
I'm as concerned about the next turtle as anybody else, okay? I'm really concerned about what turtles consume in their natural habitats.
You know,
but here's the funny thing. A few years ago, during a football game at Clemson, I got an email from an activist claiming that they were doing things behind the scenes to kill this tradition at Clemson, that the balloon launch was hurting the environment.
Right.
He gave me a list of reasons why, and he said they have an organization and they're out to kill this thing.
That's crazy.
And apparently they did. Not sure if it was them, but somebody got to the board of trustees and the powers that be up there and said, this has got to go. And I was there when they had the world record launch against Maryland back in, the 80s, I think it was. They let loose about, 500,000 balloons or something?
Well,
that's a little bit over the top.
But the balloons are great. But you know what? Clemson's shooting off balloons because they got a big commitment this week, which you'll have more information coming up with about as we come back on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. As we bring you this first week of football, we'd love to hear from you. 800-956-7266. That's how you get in touch with us. Your thoughts on Clemson's scariest opponent, South Carolina's scariest opponent, the two against each other, whether you think South Carolina has the ability to close the gap with Clemson continuing, and all the things that go along with Clemson's quarterback controversy. Or I think what was the word that,
let's don't use the big C word.
What was the word
yet when it comes to that quarterback battle? Maybe competition.
There was a word David Cutcliffe used at ACC Media Days. I think it was quarterback circumstance is what he said.
Right.
So I like quarterback circumstance.
Yeah. They got a circumstance there. I mean, it is going to be intriguing to watch what develops there starting on Friday at 5:30 when the Tigers go to practice for the first time. And they'll come out of the locker room in those helmets and shorts for a couple of days, and they'll get right at it. Now, you know, Lawrence has been there since January, and I know his football acumen is probably off the charts. The thing about Deshaun Watson that made him successful so early was his ability to pick up Chad Morris's offense from the get-go and just run with it and do his thing. Now it's the serious time of game planning, and they'll have about maybe a week or 10 days to kind of continue evaluating and deciphering between the two. But then at some point, you got to name your guy. Or, I mean, maybe the thinking is that Kelly Bryant is the guy, and if anybody's going to overcome him, you've got about 10 days to do it. So how quickly Lawrence in particular steps right in and has a feel for the offense and can read the coverages and things of that nature will be key in deciding what happens there.
Well, I think more about what Cleveland Farrell said, and his words spoke volumes to me in the fact that the guys in the locker room, they already kind of feel like they know who the starting quarterback is, and it's not Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Now,
the other part of this whole equation is people try to make all the comparisons to other situations. This is a very unique situation in the fact that you have a quarterback who is coming up who might, at the end of the day, be one of the most skilled guys, not named Deshaun Watson, or he might be better than Watson. That's blasphemous to possibly suggest at this point. But I'm just saying, there are people who are saying that he has the goods. Bryant, though, has the support of the players, and that's the thing that makes this, as you would say, kind of complicated.
The thing what Farrell said, and we talked about this, I think, some last week, Pro, and after he said it, yes, he did say what you're saying he said, which kind of flies right into the face of what the coaches have been saying, and that is it's a close competition. Yeah, Kelly Bryant is going to get the kind of the benefit of the doubt early start as the number one guy, but from Dabo Sweeney to Tony Elliott to Brandon Streeter, they're all talking about how far Lawrence has come along and how tight that competition is. Maybe that's just coach speak to keep everybody involved and interested in keeping the young pup excited about his position. But players, they don't usually lie.
No.
Players tell you what's on their minds. They don't have a filter like that. And if that's what Farrell is saying, maybe that's an indication of where things really stand.
And do you think they learned a thing or two about the way they handled this with Cole Stout and Deshaun Watson?
I don't think they did, because I thought that they knew that Cole Stout was a stopgap. That was just, he was holding the
I
door.
think they regret not starting. If you pinned him down and cut him open and let him bleed out the truth, I think they would tell you they regret not starting Deshaun Watson in that Georgia game from the very beginning, because, I mean, they lost some valuable field time when he was on the sideline. As soon as he got in there, pow-yow, down the field, touchdown.
What was that? Pow-yow?
Pow-yow, down the field, touchdown before the half. I mean, listen, you hold your team back if you don't have the absolute best guy in there, and I think maybe they learned a lesson from that. And if Trevor Lawrence is the absolute best guy, then he'll start from the get-go.
Well, the thing about it is, if you look at Cole Stout and what he did and Deshaun Watson, I'm not certain that the offense changed that much. Because Deshaun will tell you, I'm a pocket quarterback first. When I start to run, it's because I'm escaping the rush and I'm still looking downfield.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I think you got two diametrically different quarterbacks, and whoever is chosen, that's the offense for that quarterback. And therein lies why the decision has to be made as soon as possible, because now you're game planning and you're putting the package together.
One of the things that also rang true with me is what Dabo said, and he said it over the course of 2 or 3 different interview segments the week of ACC Media Days, and that was, even if Trevor Lawrence is the guy, they still have to find a way to put Kelly Bryant on the field in his mind, whether that's in a special package, whether that's as a receiver or a wildcat back. Kelly Bryant is going to see time one way or the other. Just depends on how much that takes away from Lawrence if he gets the job.
Well, it was a big weekend for Clemson in recruiting. Andrew Booth committed today, the cornerback from Lawrenceville, Georgia. By all accounts, one of the best cornerbacks in the country. That was their 5th commitment since the All-In Cookout commenced on Friday, when Sergio Allen kicked things off with his quick commitment for the 2020 class, and it went on from there. The Tigers picked up a defensive lineman from Missouri, right in Kansas City, wide receiver from California. They got Andrew Booth today. I mentioned Sergio Allen was the commitment for the 2020 class, which was a big pickup, one of the top linebackers in the country. And they also picked up Levante Bentley, linebacker from Birmingham. They've got 22 commitments from 13 different states. Only one from the state of South Carolina.
Which will sure make some Clemson fans be like, why aren't we getting any South Carolina people?
Well, I mean,
because you're recruiting worldwide.
Well, yeah, I think Clemson's
I would hope they understand. I hope they understand that.
With their success and their brand right now, they are able to go anywhere in the country. I mean, to go out to California, to Folsom, California, and get a wide receiver who could go anywhere in the country, who visited once and then came back with his family and committed, or to get this big-time lineman out of Missouri who on his first visit to Clemson commits when he had Ohio State and Wisconsin waiting in the wings. See, I look at who do you commit over? Who would take you? That tells me. And if you're picking Clemson over Ohio State or Wisconsin, or you're picking a school over practically everybody else in the country, tells me how good the coaches think you are. Just a terrific job of recruiting by Clemson. They've got everything in place. The winning attracts top players. Top players attract top players. The facilities, what they offer educationally, what they can show from a family standpoint. They just got a lot of things to sell to kids right now, and they're buying into it from all over the country.
800-956-7266. Wes is calling in Florence, wants to talk Clemson football. What's up, Wes?
Hey, what's up? 2 things. One, do you think Booth reminds you more of Alexander or the defensive back from Ohio State that got a couple interceptions against Clemson in the game? They actually lost 31-0. And number 2, Phil, are you coming to the Not Supposed to Everybody Know press conference in Florence tomorrow with the new Arena Football League team being announced? Because I've got to go cover it for New 13.
Oh, no, sir. Won't be there for that. So call back and tell us about it. And as far as the comparisons, I mean, I'm not one. None of us here are qualified to compare, what a player, his skills look like compared to others. But I think that from what I've read from people, they're talking about him being one of the most significant defensive back pickups for Clemson, probably since Alexander, or maybe some of the other terrific defensive backs that Clemson has brought in over the years. So he comes from a very high-level program. He comes from a program, Archer High School in Lawrenceville, Georgia, that has a secondary that could be the envy of some college teams. He's got a teammate, Jalen Phillips, who's a safety that Clemson is heavily recruiting as well and could end up landing him.
And he's one of the highest-ranked recruits. I know you hate the rankings, but he's one of the highest-ranked recruits. In fact, I think the highest-ranked recruit on Clemson's board from what they had going into
rankings, schmankings.
I know you hate the rankings. Speaking of rankings, people wanting to know about how the rankings go inside basketball circles inside the state of South Carolina, the state that did a deep dive, and we'll analyze that next. Sports Talk, Phil Kornblut, Willie P. and the Pro on South Carolina Radio Network. Hope you're enjoying yourself today. 800-956-7266, brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union, where now through tomorrow, if you use your Founders Visa Signature or Platinum Visa credit card, you can receive double CU Rewards points on lodging, travel, and dining purchases. Visit foundersfcu.com/visa for full details. We're talking Clemson football.
Yeah, buddy of mine texting me here. He's a longtime Clemson fan, goes back a lot of years. He's about Pro's age. He goes back many, many years. And he's telling me that
easy on the
no,
ages.
Because he's probably as old as you are.
The bowl thing, the balloon thing at Clemson, he says, goes back to at least to 1977. And he said They set the record in 1983 because that was the last game on probation. That's what he's saying is when they set the record of like 360,000 balloons going up before the Maryland game.
Well, I find it ironic that they are ceasing this because of the fact that it's killing turtles when it actually started, or at least the record came against a school that has a mascot, Maryland. The Terrapins is a turtle.
Very turtle.
Show me a turtle that has died as a result of eating one of these balloons. I want to see the evidence.
Let's continue with the shell game and go to Mark in Aiken. What's up, Mark? You're on Sports Talk.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Just commenting and see what you guys think about this. I think the game that may concern me just a tad for Clemson would be the A&M game, only because it's there. And I think the Jimbo factor might play a bigger piece than people think it will. He knows Battle and he knows the team pretty well. And just see what you guys think about that. Thanks.
Can Jimbo cover Amari Rodgers? I just want to know.
Yeah,
because I don't think anybody on Texas A&M secondary can.
Does he have the personnel? I mean, that defense has been Swiss cheese going back 2 or 3 years.
You're being kind to Swiss cheese.
Yeah, really. And Clemson will be coming in loaded for bear. Now, look, I think Jimbo in time is going to do well at Texas A&M. He's going to recruit the state of Texas very well, get his players in there, but it's going to take time. And we're going to see them twice. We're going to see them against the Tigers and the Gamecocks. We'll see how each handles. This will give us maybe a little bit of an ability to judge the Tigers and the Gamecocks against each other based on how they play Texas A&M.
Same thing with NC State last year.
Yeah, the same thing we mentioned about South Carolina having a chance against Georgia is the same reason that I think Texas A&M has no chance against Clemson. That is, as we said, Georgia has some young guys starting for their first time on their defense, even though they played their bench a lot. For Texas A&M, they're learning a new system offensively and defensively. I'm not sure they're going to be adept enough at knowing the knowledge of their system and what nuances come off that system to stop a Clemson or to move the football against.
Well,
Clemson.
this is the other thing too, and I feel like a lot of times people are saying the same things about the 3 different schools in both of these conferences that have new coaches. I think about people are saying the same thing about Florida, Texas A&M, and Florida State, and the fact that all 3 of these schools have talent. How could they have not won with talent? It is not necessarily about coaching, I think, because, again, one of the coaches from Florida State is now the coach at Texas A&M. You have Dan Mullen, who coached in the SEC at Mississippi State, who's now the head coach at Florida, and obviously Willie Taggart at Florida State. These are all very accomplished coaches and well-accomplished coaches who were there before, with the exception of maybe Florida. But the fact of the matter is, the compilation of the talent that was there did not work. It wasn't just that Florida didn't have a quarterback. It wasn't just that Florida State lost their quarterback. It wasn't just that A&M couldn't play defense. All 3 of the combinations of talent don't work, and to expect an immediate turnaround, in my mind, is foolish.
Well, you look at what they've done defensively. Now, last year they gave up 31 points per game, and before that, they weren't horrible, 24.5, then 22, then back in 2014, 28.1. Their offense was always good, 33 points a game, 35 points a game. They always had good quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. The quarterback who will likely be the starter against Clemson, Nick Starkel, is a guy with good size, and he's got some experience. Or maybe Kelly Mond is going to be the Mond. After camp, we shall see. He's got some experience behind him. A&M being in Texas, being that program, they've got some good players in there. They were a team, obviously, that was kind of coming apart under Sumlin in the last half part of the season that he was there, and they were ready for a change for whatever reason. And they brought in one of the best coaches in the country. I mean, you can't say that Jimbo Fisher doesn't know how to build a team and doesn't know how to win. He's one of the best coaches in the country, and he will get it done there. It's just I can't see him getting it done in time for
September 8th
to bite Clemson.
No.
Though if you're Clemson, I mean, you still have to be. You are walking into an SEC stadium. 100 be about 100,000 there. 102,000 is going to be a sold out crowd. They'll have a chance to open up against Northwestern State. Texas A&M will sort of get the kinks out, and Clemson will open up against Furman.
They'll have a couple extra days to prepare for Clemson too, because they play that game on a Thursday, I believe.
Yeah, the third quarter, Clemson has a 2 to 3 score lead. You would feel they have control. If they don't, then the other sideline starts to believe they can beat this team, just like Syracuse did, just like a combination of non-talent and some talent at South Carolina almost ambushed a disinterested Clemson a few years ago. So you gotta be wary about the mental aspect of a team and not letting your foot off their neck early in the contest, which Clemson has to do at College Station.
800-956-7266. Somebody actually called Brian off air and mentioned Syracuse as a potential scary opponent. After talking to Dino Babers and after kind of talking to some of the Syracuse people, some of what that game, it was very much a compilation more of everything that could have gone wrong for Clemson went wrong, not just the injury to Kelly Bryant, the fact that they couldn't block in the backfield with pass protection, the fact that they couldn't get any separation at wide receiver, the fact that the defensive secondary just had so many breakdowns, and also Syracuse played the game of their lives. They didn't win they didn't win a game the whole rest of the year. So I don't really look at that game as a scary game, and especially now Syracuse has Clemson's attention when they might not have had their attention before.
You left out one thing. It was also on Friday the 13th.
Wow.
And it was in that dome.
Yes.
On that hard concrete surface. Has not been a good start to training camp for the Panthers. Of course, over the weekend, their starting right tackle, an outstanding player, All-Pro Darrell Williams, dislocated patella, torn MCL. Now, today, going down with an injury, maybe for an extended period, is cornerback Russ Cockrell, carted off the field during practice after an end zone collision with receiver Torrey Smith. Observers there saying that the collision caused players and media to, quote, hear a bone break. And Cockrell yelled out, quote, "My leg is broke." After lying on the ground where teammates surrounded him with, quote, quiet and disgusted looks, he was then ushered off the field in an air cast.
Maybe there's bad juju at Wofford. I don't know.
I mean, it's practice, but listen, there's collisions, there's cutting, there's cleats sticking in the dirt, and things happen even in practice. It doesn't have to be full speed in a game where you get hurt. It doesn't have to happen in a collision in football. So that's just unfortunate. 2 starters already down for the Panthers, and we're not even a week into training camp.
It's not good. And the other part of it too is that, we would talk about this before the show. A lot of these things have been happening in like non-contact drills. I'm wondering, wouldn't you rather have them, being built up and immune to the contact? Because that's what they always used to teach us when we were kids. You have contact in practice so that you're not immune from a standpoint of playing in the game, but you at least are used to taking contact, and absorbing contact makes you stronger.
Yeah, it's why I hate NFL exhibition games, because so many good players go down for the season. Your entire, you work all this time off season, your entire team can be changed if the wrong guy goes down in the preseason, and you have to give your starters, some time to play in those games. Quarterback, a key receiver, watching the Packers, I just hold my breath and cross my fingers. It's number somebody doesn't get hurt there and is lost for the season.
More on Clemson's spectacular recruiting weekend next.
Guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network as they continue on a Monday, 30th day of July. Just a couple more days in July. We have a report date later on this week for South Carolina and Clemson football. We're going to hear from Will Muschamp and some players as well on Thursday. Get a chance to tour at least the beginning stages as they start finishing the plans on the brand new football building going up over at South Carolina. And we'll talk a little bit later on in the show on the impact of not only that building, but what it means for South Carolina as it continues to really get itself amongst the upper echelon programs as they add that facility. We'll hear from Dabo Swinney and the Clemson players on Friday. Dabo before the first practice on Friday evening for the Tigers at the complex up at Clemson. And we'll, of course, hear from some Clemson players afterwards as well. Get the first thoughts maybe of some of the players outside of those who were at Media Day on where they sit on not just the season, but who could be playing signal caller for the Tigers. Speaking of the Tigers, Corn, in recruiting, it was Dabo Swinney's cookout weekend, and let's just say their proficiency when it comes to guys who are making decisions this week was downright flawless, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, they bring in the guys that they are really hot after for the cookout, guys they think they can get, and they had a very good run from Thursday through today of 5 commitments, 4 for their 2019 class, 1 for their 2020 class. And so, you know, if you're Clemson, you got a lot of momentum going once again on the recruiting side. And, I mean, they're just a very efficient recruiting operation. They don't offer a lot of players. And what's amazing to me, there's 2 things that's amazing to me. Well, 3 things. They don't offer a lot of players, number 1. Number 2, everybody they've got committed, they've got 22 commitments thus far. None has taken an official visit yet because they don't do official visits. I mean, Dabo, you give him credit. He writes his own rules and he sticks to them, while others are doing official visits in the summer and things of that nature, and that might be good. It might pay off. He won't do it. No official visits in the summer. The official visits will come in the fall per usual. And then the third thing, and this is the most amazing thing to me, is when you commit to Clemson, that's it. You shut it down. There's no more visits. There's no more contemplating any other school. They trust the commitments to abide by that and stick with their pledge. And conversely, they don't try and recruit over you in that class. You're their guy for that position. And it's sort of a mutual understanding. And it works. It actually, you don't have to worry about a Clemson commitment looking around.
And they haven't had any decommitments, have they?
Oh no, not this year.
From this year, yeah.
They haven't had a decommitment. I mean, a true decommitments. Now, Shaq Smith decommitted a few years ago, but he decommitted because the rule is at Clemson that you can decommit, of course, it's your option. If you want to take other official visits, you can't be committed to them. Mm-hmm. You have to decommit. And he did that, and then he recommitted to Clemson. He decommitted so he could take other officials. It's just it's a smooth operating machine. They identify who they want. Of course, the winning helps. It attracts top players so they can kind of choose, okay, you, we want to go after you. They keep their offers to a minimum. They keep their official visits to a minimum. And they have a plan, and it just plays out for them, and it's working well. They're having another very good year. So let's say what's happened since we were last with you on Friday. So today, cornerback Andrew Booth of Lawrenceville, Georgia, committed to the Tigers. That's the 5th from the prospects who attended the cookout. He chose Clemson over Auburn, Georgia, and several other major offers, including USC, Nebraska, Alabama, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Stanford, and Oregon. And he just felt like Clemson was the place for him. And his visit to the campus, his 3rd one this year, and the visit for the cookout sort of sealed the deal. Had his family there with him and everything. He was at Clemson for a junior day in January and back for the spring game. So that's the 22nd commitment. And now Clemson waits on linebacker Spencer Lytle of Bellflower, California. He's choosing between Clemson and Wisconsin, and he announces on Saturday. And just based on his reaction to things and his interaction with me, I mean, if a player is talking to you this close to his decision, if he hasn't shut down a media that covers a particular school, it tells me that school's got a good chance to get him. So I think Clemson's going to get Spencer Lytle of Bellflower, California.
Some crystal balls might be breaking as a result of that.
Well, I don't know what the crystal balls are saying.
They are saying on Wisconsin.
Oh, I could be wrong.
Find that interesting.
I could be wrong. But my feeling is, from my interaction with him, my feeling is Clemson.
It's a long way from Bellflower, California to Clemson.
To anywhere.
It's also a long way to Wisconsin.
No, he hasn't said anything, to me. Just the fact that he recently visited Clemson, and he has said a lot of good things about Clemson, and the fact that he's still talking. Maybe he's just a nice guy and he's not going to cut anybody off, but I would hedge my bet towards Clemson.
Yeah, you don't know what turns a guy on. That may be a program at Wisconsin that he loves, because let's face it, it's not so much the distance as it is the difference in temperatures depending on where he's playing in the Big Ten.
He loves Venables, and Venables has been recruiting him hard. He's been retweeting a lot of stuff from the Clemson commitments. I think the fact that Venables got this contract and all this money and stuff and is going to be locked in to Clemson for a while is really helping them with these top-line defensive players. So they also got defensive lineman Etinosa Rubin, 6'3", 275, out of Riverside, Missouri. He picked Clemson over Ohio State and Wisconsin. He committed on his first ever visit to Clemson. Had his family there with him as well. Of course, they liked what they saw. They liked the atmosphere and liked what he was being told by the coaches. 55 tackles and 5 sacks. And then receiver Joe Nagata, Folsom, California. Again, a highly recruited player. Washington, Notre Dame, Southern Cal, the other schools on his favorites list. 81 catches for 1,777 yards. Tells me he motors after the catch. And 26 touchdowns. And so those are the ones that committed since we last talked to you. We had the other commitments for you at the end of last week. Now, South Carolina didn't do anything this weekend. Surprisingly, they decided not to have a major recruiting function. They did have some guys come in for visits Wednesday through Friday, I believe. Cam Smith was one who went over there, the cornerback out of Westwood, and he tweeted over the weekend that he has made his decision. And he tells us that he will hold that decision until August 17th after his team's opener against Lugoff Elgin. USC, Georgia, and Tennessee are the three that he chose from. He camped last month at USC and Georgia. He took a visit to Tennessee. He was back at USC with his parents last week, and he just said it feels great to get the process over. And he said it was starting to get annoying to him. He said telling the coaches they were not shocked. He said, but I could tell they got excited about it when I told them. And he said he also looked at the atmosphere and the fans and new facilities at the school he chose. And he also looked at the depth chart to make sure there wasn't a lot of depth above him so he could possibly play as a freshman. USC offered 2019 cornerback Dedrick Holmes of Evans, Georgia, his first major offer. He visited back in March for a spring practice. Liberty has also offered him. Defensive back Tyus Fields of Cornelius, North Carolina, brother of Clemson corner Mark Fields, committed to Tennessee. One-time USC and Clemson target, linebacker Kalen DeLoach, committed to Florida State. Clemson quarterback target in the 2020 class, DJ Ugalele, Bellflower, California, was offered by Oklahoma. I retweeted that by saying he's from Bellflower, Oklahoma. He's actually from California. USC target defensive lineman Jaquez Sorrells visited Alabama on Saturday. He was at USC last week. Hammond 2020 defensive lineman Alex Huntley was at Florida Friday and Georgia Saturday. Offensive lineman Tyrice Drayton of James Island committed to the Citadel. Basketball 2020 6'8" P.J. Hall of Durham offered by Florida and Georgia. 6'8" Greg Gant of Fayetteville committed to Providence. He had USC and Clemson offers. And Clemson offered 2021 6'8" Bretner Mutombo of Sewanee, Georgia.
Back next.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Okay, we're back at Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Great first hour. Hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to more here in hour number 2. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. Email talkback@sportstalksc.com and on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. If you haven't signed up to follow us on Twitter, we suggest you do so. Our ever-growing family of Twitterites. And, you know, Twitter went back couple of months ago, maybe a month ago, and cleaned out a bunch of fake Twitter accounts. None of our people are fake. They're all real Sports Talk Twitter followers. So we encourage you to sign up to keep up with what we're doing there. Clemson has just handed out an offer in the 2020 class, tweeted out by the young man, E.J. Williams, 6'3", 183, a wide receiver from Phoenix City, Alabama, where the Tigers have struck twice in the last couple of years. And now they're going to go after this guy. You know, Nick Saban's got to be kind of, not that he's impressed by anybody outside of Tuscaloosa, because, I mean, he's done an impressive job himself. But he's got to be kind of looking down the road at Clemson and going, they're coming into Alabama a little too much and starting to take too many good players. And if they get the kid from Oxford, Alabama, the center, if Clemson were to pull him out of Alabama, considering his strong ties to Alabama in particular and Auburn's efforts to get in there as well, that would be eye-opening big time. But Justin Ross was eye-opening in this 2018 class.
Well, I think back to remember that whole little thing that Dabo said late last year when he was talking about Saban, retiring, and he got in a little bit of hot water about that. I'm wondering if that is an actual tactic, being used by
well, his new contract's going to keep him till 25 if he decides to coach that long. And like he said at SEC Media Days,
are not they don't mean anything.
He doesn't sound like a guy. If his health stays good, and the wife still wants him to work, that's what he wants to do. He wants to continue to coach. He's probably going to go ahead and coach into his 70s. Something Spurrier said he would never do, but he did.
Yeah, well, the one thing you got to watch out is to find a young man who's from a state. And then you look at in Clemson, let's face it, kids from Alabama has seen Clemson because Clemson is always playing who in the playoffs? Alabama.
Yeah.
So you don't go for the guy that, hey, I grew up loving Alabama. I want the kid that hates Alabama and wants to beat Alabama. That's who Dabo's finding. He's finding those kids that, hey, I want to play against them.
Now, in Bentley's case, I'm not sure how hard Alabama pushed on him. We're talking Levanta Bentley, not Jake. Not Jake. I mean, they were involved. He really liked Miami. Bentley did. He really liked Miami. He was kind of hoping Miami would jump in there. Apparently, they never really did. And then Clemson moved in and impressed him and got on him strong, and they were able to get him at the end of the day. So the things that Clemson has done are now, South Carolina trying to catch up and get things done to where they can be in terms of bricks and mortar in a competitive way with Clemson. And we're going to go over on Wednesday and get a chance to see their new ops building, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. Now, it's not going to be the opulent thing that Clemson built, which is, of course, outrageous. That's not what South Carolina wanted. That's not what Muschamp wanted. I mean, he's got some fun things in there where they can, like there's going to be a little music studio in there where they
barbershop,
can cut songs and a barbershop and things like that where the guys can hang out and have a good time and things of that nature. But it's going to be more of a working building for them. And I can think back to the days, and longtime followers of the South Carolina program can as well, when, the football players used to have to get on a bus at the Roost and bus over to what was then called Carolina Stadium and later Williams-Brice, but to me, always known as the Cockpit. Bus over there, go to the locker room there, get back on buses, go back to the practice fields behind the Roost, and repeat after practice, and do that every day. And, I mean, it's a handicap for South Carolina. I'm telling you, one of the first things that recruiters who have this advantage use, and it's something that's noticed by recruits and their family, is the stadium on campus and facilities on campus where it's all centralized.
Right.
USC, for the longest time, didn't have that, and it hurt them. Now, they're still going to have to get over to the facility from campus. That's not a walk. That's a drive.
Yeah,
but at least when you get there, everything is going to be there. Locker rooms, meeting rooms, practice fields, indoor facility is centralized. The players can hang there as long as they want to. And the way the campus is growing, maybe 15, 20 years from now, the campus will engulf it, and it will be on campus.
Well, that's kind of the thing that I'm wondering about, because, you know, when they're doing all this stuff with 650 Lincoln, where they have most of their student athletes live, I'm almost wondering if they can't utilize those apartment complexes that are around. And again, I know those are bought out for people and things of that nature. A lot of that is residents. I don't know if they can utilize that space to put like a football players housing situation out there to, again, like you said, minimize the amount of travel back and forth.
The NCAA won't allow that. You can't have specific housing for a sport. You have to mingle in with the student body.
Right.
They don't have used to. They had the Roost, and Florida State had the Burt Reynolds dorm where the athletes stayed. Alabama had their dorm. That was one thing that got Danny Ford in hot water at Clemson back in the day. He wanted a dorm. He wanted a facility for football players, and Clemson instead built an academic center. And he butted heads with the president back in the day. Was that President Lennon back then? I think it was.
So, yeah.
Lennon or Stalin? I can't remember. I think it was Lennon.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not asking. That's funny. I'm not asking you this. I'm more asking this to the NCAA. What is the difference between building a sports-specific training complex and a sports-specific housing development? That doesn't mean.
Yeah, the difference is that private schools complain because they don't have all the money that the big schools have. And they're going to build
tough noogies, as I say.
No, but they're going to try to level the playing field as they can. But I will say,
and guess what? If it's donated by somebody, guess what? Privately, then they'll take that money gladly.
But the interesting thing is, for every disadvantage, there's an advantage, because you have a Bryson Allen Williams who's in broadcasting, and he walks a block from the campus, and he's got his workplace where he's doing his practicum right there, because they're in the city of Columbia.
Right.
So there is some advantages of being in a city versus in say a campus where it's a little bit out.
Yeah. Well, I think this new setup for South Carolina is going to be it's already a boost in their recruiting. I mean, we've been talking so much about what Clemson has done because they had a very active weekend. If South Carolina had gotten some commitments over the weekend, we'd be talking about them. Still, South Carolina's got a very good-looking class, and the reason they're getting some of these players is because now they've got facilities that match up with most everybody, and it's a centralized thing too. And I think that's going to be very important for them moving forward. And you look ahead to what South Carolina might be doing in recruiting. I mean, I think it looks very good for them with Cam Smith. At this particular point in time, I see no reason why he wouldn't pick South Carolina. I mean, you never know. He hasn't said it, but I wouldn't see why he wouldn't pick South Carolina. Jaquez Sorrells, a much-desired defensive lineman who went to Alabama over the weekend after visiting USC earlier in the week. I think South Carolina's got a real good shot at him.
That quarterback is kind of good, too.
Ryan Helinski, if he comes in, if he has a kind of senior year out in California that lights everybody up, and then he goes to the All-American game and does extremely well, comes into South Carolina in January and gets involved, that could spark a lot of other big-time players to come their way. Still, the difference is why is Clemson and Alabama and Oklahoma and these people getting the prime guys? Because they're getting to the playoffs. South Carolina's got to break that glass ceiling and get to an SEC championship game again and get to the postseason, because I mean, you cannot buy the type of coverage you get on ESPN leading up to the semifinals. That helps you so many ways in recruiting.
For a program like South Carolina, you can talk all the bricks and mortar you want to. Their best asset is they have a coach in his mid-40s, still young, hungry, with a staff that's very aggressive when they recruit.
Your biggest asset and your biggest recruiting fodder, it's not the facility, it's not the coach, it's the wins. And if you get that win on September 8th, that would be huge.
Big.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We'll take some more phone calls if we will. 800-956-7266 is how you get in touch with us. You know, Corn, it was interesting. I was at Fenway Park on Friday, and I was down there basically waiting for the seventh inning stretch to start, and I looked to my right, down the right field stands there, and I see a gentleman and a young lady wearing Gamecock shirts.
Oh, really?
Yes. So in that regard, they're everywhere, which was pretty cool. They said that he and his girlfriend were both Gamecock grads, but they were Boston natives, and they sounded like it.
Mm-hmm.
They were sounding like it, but it was cool.
Did you spit on Fenway Park for me like I asked you to?
I did not spit on Fenway Park. It was a beautiful, beautiful ballpark.
I wonder if the stuff I buried underneath the stands there is still
old.
It's a
old
slow
chicken
decaying.
bone?
It's a slow decaying
Disease.
Whatever. Come up with something here. I don't want to say bomb. That's too mean.
That's not nice.
I would say something that would create an odor maybe in a couple of years.
You mentioned the practices starting this week for South Carolina and Clemson. High school football practice is already underway. John in Charleston has a high school football question and comment. He joins us on Sports Talk. What's up, John?
Hey, nothing much, guys. I missed David Shelton the other day, and I was calling to see. I don't know if you got a mind like a steel trap, but I guess I was looking for like a summary of what he went over, and if you could kind of go over it for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first day of high school practice, and he was busy getting around the low country in the Charleston area and dodging the raindrops. That's been the big thing down there, as you would know. I mean, it's been raining a lot in that part of the state, and it's affecting practice and schedules and things of that nature. And he'll be with us every Friday here moving forward. We'll catch up with him this Friday on high school football and what he's hearing around the state. We talked about Somerville because I read a tweet from a television station in Charleston who had gone to the Somerville practice, and the quarterback was quoted as saying they're going to win the state championship this year. So we debated whether or not there was some legitimacy to that. He still thinks Dutch Fork in 5A is the best team in the state, but Somerville will be improved and could give some people some trouble coming out of the low country. In the upper state, we talked about maybe Dorman once again being the prime team in that Spartanburg County area. And then over in the Rock Hill area, South Point will be very good once again, despite some heavy not
losses.
Personnel losses, but quality losses. But they just reload, and they'll be very good once again. And down in the PD area, of course, Dillon will be strong once again over their way. We talked about Lakeview and Lamar in the 1A group being very, very good once again, and Hartsville once again being among the best teams in the state in its class.
Well, one of the things that David said was the fact that when I asked him about where the linemen, because we talked about all the tremendous factor of skill players in the state, and he says, well, this is a poor year for lines of scrimmage in South Carolina as far as prospects are concerned. But that's one of the reasons he liked what was the team you just mentioned to win the championship? Not Somerville, but Dutch Fork. Because he thought Dutch Fork had maybe the best lines of scrimmage in the state.
Well, we're coming off a year where you had some significant talent leave the state, which, of course, has left the cupboard very bare. It's funny, we talk a lot about the great 2019 basketball class, 2019 for football. You can look at the in-state prospects at Clemson and South Carolina. You can look at some of the people who have committed elsewhere and not necessarily, or I guess basically a lack of star power among, the in-state people as far as where they've committed. There's really not a lot of, I would say, blue chip talent that's coming out of the state for the 2019, as far as that goes for high school players.
You mean in
state of South Carolina?
You mean like big time players in the 2019 class? No, it's not a particularly big or deep class in 2019. I think sit here and kind of scan through my memory about some of the players in the state. I mean,
There's good players. It's just,
there are some good players. We talked about Clemson's class and the Tigers just having the one in-state commitment to this point.
I mean, Zach Pickens is a guy you think of.
Pickens is kind of a national guy.
That's the guy.
That would be one who really stands out. Jamario Holly from Northwestern, who's a USC commitment, maybe the best in that position in the state. Between South Carolina and Clemson, and this is a good indicator. I mean, there's only high school-wise in the state this year, there's only 3 committed between the 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of tells you what they think of the in-state crop.
Is that 4 with Keyshawn Toney?
Let me see. Did I skip him?
Yes.
Let's see. South Carolina's got got Jamario Holly from Northwestern.
Pickens.
Pickens would be 2. Yeah, Toney would be a 3rd from Wilson Elko. So that'd be 4.
Yes.
From the state. Out of between the 2 of them, they've got 40 commitments.
But the dangerous thing about South Carolina, the high school football coaching in the state is so good that suddenly people will say, that kid's from South Carolina. Well, how did he get so good? So you're scared to let guys, even who look borderline, get out of the state because some of them just turn out to be studs once they mature.
That's a very interesting point because of the fact that some of these guys who go elsewhere, that's going to increase the profile of this state, which in turn could get more high talented players to possibly go to South Carolina and Clemson in years when you have that talent.
You look at some of the players who've been following around the state in terms of recruiting, and you bring up a good point. Cooper Dawson is another major prospect out of Hanahan who has a Clemson offer. To me, if you have a Clemson or USC offer and it's committable, I put you in the major category. So he's another one to keep an eye on. Kendrell Flowers from Irmo, a running back, has some Power 5 offers. Nothing from USC or Clemson at this point, but he'd be considered perhaps a top prospect. Jacoby Pinckney, who committed to Virginia Tech, so he's considered a top prospect. It is not, from that standpoint, you're right. From a recruiting angle, it's not that kind of year in South Carolina where it's just blowing up with big-time talent that USC and Clemson are involved with. Maybe that explains part of the reason why both schools, in particular Clemson, has gone far and wide to try and find players.
And I think it's also a good thing. And the other part of this, and again, we talk about this when it's related to basketball just because there's so few players, but you have to go, like Pro said, you have to go to other states where you find players who feel like they have something to prove to the big name brand inside that state. If you're South Carolina, you're not going to be able to go head-to-head with Alabama, let's say, for instance, on recruit. But if you can go into the state of Alabama and get a guy that they might have passed on, but that's still also good and can contribute to your ball club, that's the kind of guy you got to win with.
Well, let's look at the guys in the state who have committed now. I did not mention Luke Deal from Emerald. He'd be considered a top player, and he's committed to Auburn.
Yes.
You've got John Gillott from Dorman, who's committed to Duke at this point.
Yes.
DJ Chisholm from Berkeley's committed to East Carolina. You've got a player committed to, well, he would have been a South Carolina player, Tyrone Hopper, who would have gone to Gaffney. He's now in Roswell, Georgia, who's committed to Florida. So we've got some guys in state who have committed to some Power 5 schools, but South Carolina and Clemson, for whatever reason, did not go after them very hard, and they opted to leave the state. We've got a player going to Kentucky. There's one going to Georgia Tech, one to North Carolina, one to Pitt, one to Virginia Tech. Got 3 going to Wake Forest.
But again, I look at those programs, again, all due respect to those programs, but the only one that really I would say you're sad about losing would maybe be Luke Deal. That's the only guy I think you'd be like heartbreaking to lose on him.
You know, you're right. And he grew up a Clemson guy, and it looked like Clemson had the inside track for him all along, but he opted to go to Auburn for maybe the reason he wanted to get away from home a little bit, and Auburn reminded him very much of Clemson. So it would be like going to Clemson without going to Clemson.
Crowded depth chart.
No lake, though.
There is no lake. But you're not far from the Gulf if you want to go down I-85. But Clemson's done well at filling their tight end needs in this class, too.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. We continue here on a Monday. Gang's all back in town. Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, Professor Tom Hayes. Hope you're enjoying yourself here today. The Sporting News, in its infinite wisdom, has placed its poll for the upcoming football season in the preseason. Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Georgia 3, Ohio State 4, Oklahoma 5, South Carolina all the way down, and number 23, which is an increase and I think a nice boost for the Gamecocks, getting people or getting them on people's radar.
Well, I think if you're South Carolina, you don't mind kind of being in the shadows to start the season, because you can change that very quickly with a win over Georgia in week 2, and you'll climb right up in the polls that matter, the coaches poll and the AP poll. I think that's not a bad place for South Carolina to start, down at 23. And Clemson at number 2 kind of fits what people think about them across the board. So that I got no argument with either one of those.
I like that they are at least on people's radar, but not too high on the radar. So you don't see you're in that sweet spot right now. If you're South Carolina, people are talking about you. You're kind of in a again, an in-between point here where you're not necessarily a forgotten person, but people actually know that you're bringing back a pretty good team that won 9 games, that got to a New Year's Day bowl, and has a statement game in week number 2 in the toughest football conference in America. And in my mind, you get people like Peter Burns who say things like, oh, hey, I think South Carolina is going to win that game. Things of that nature. It's, and people are saying it like they're not joking either, which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, Peter, he went out on a very big limb there to state that clearly.
He said it on our show the week before SEC Media Days.
No, and he backed it up at SEC Media Days. He did not shy away from that.
And that wasn't just playing to the Chamber of Commerce trying to be the mayor here.
But you know what? Whether it's Peter Burns or us or anybody else in the media, just because we say it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Right.
They got to go out and play ball. 800-956-7266 is our number if you'd like to join us here on Sports Talk. Email talkback at sportstalksc.com and on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. We should check out our Twitter feed, Mr. Pelagic, and see what people are saying there, because they have been very busy there commenting on a number of different things.
Yeah, we had a lot of response to our poll question, which you can find at sportstalksc.com, about the scariest opponent for Clemson. There are some Carolina fans who have spoken about it because of the fact that they think that South Carolina is their scariest opponent, because they're hopeful that the 4-game win streak will end this year. Got a lot of responses there. Texas A&M, this is from Tim, who tweets us at Sports Talk SC. Texas A&M, because it's early on the road, and then at FSU, he believes that they will be improved by game 8. I still think it's going to take another full year for them to at least get the kind of team where they're back in. But in my mind, it's weird. This is from Al. South Carolina, ACC cakewalk, of course, because that's why it's all known as the All Cupcake Conference. That's interesting. The Gamecocks will smack Clemson by 10 in Death Valley. I doubt that scares them as much as it will hurt them.
Whoa. He said South Carolina will beat Clemson by 10?
Yes, this is what he says.
In Death Valley.
Yes. Someone says whoever they end up playing in the national championship, which is an interesting take, because, again, you'd have to get past the semifinal, which they did not do last year, which I think is interesting. And, here's probably FSU would be my take, then a toss-up A&M or home South Carolina. Still nobody loves my Boston College pick. People – see, this is the thing. I always pick a team that usually is somebody who – is off the beaten path, because again, none of these predictions ever go right. None of these things ever go according to Hoyle, if you will. And so Boston College, I took a look at them, and I'm just saying, like you said, preseason player of the year, ACC, a coach who is entering his 5th year in Steve Adazio. He's got a quarterback who he's got rising up there, who's got starting experience. You got offensive line. You got a great defense that they feel very much in love with. And you have the fact that you went toe-to-toe with Clemson in their building for 3.5 quarters. And you get them at home.
Well, see, I'm going to blame Clemson's performance last year, because I just saw a replay of the game of the weekend, was the performance by Georgia and Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. Because let's face it, since we've had the playoffs, there's at least been, if there's one great game, the second was a stinker. And suddenly there was Clemson and Alabama sitting there, and you knew it wasn't going to live up to the hype after what you saw Oklahoma and Georgia put on.
You're saying that the the results of that game directly impact the
Yeah,
Clemson,
directly
Alabama?
impacted what happened in Alabama.
Mr. Psychological over here.
All right, 800-956-7266. You want to jump on board the show here over the next few minutes and into the next segment. We got time for more of your phone calls. Been talking a lot about the upcoming start of the practices for Clemson and South Carolina, the other schools around the state. A reminder, a Sports Talk tradition resumes in August in the second week, and that is the Palmetto Pigskin Tour, as we hit the state to visit with every school in the state not named South Carolina and Clemson, because we'll be covering them, of course, every day with with camp reports and interviews as they are made available to us. As we've touched on, Will Muschamp will have a media day on Thursday, and Dabo Swinney is going to meet with the media prior to Clemson's practice on Friday. So we'll have all that covered for you here on Sports Talk. But we're going to hit the other schools around the state, visit with their coaches. We had a couple of them on with us from the Coaches for Charity last week. We had Buddy Pugh on with us, for example, Coach Conklin from Wofford, Brent Thompson from the Citadel. We'll hit the other schools around the state. Always look forward to that. It's always fun to hear from the other coaches and players. They don't get the coverage and the notoriety of the big boys, but they work just as hard, spend just as much time developing their teams as the other schools do, and they appreciate the coverage that they get, even though they've got their own people touting them on the internet, and they get some coverage from time to time. But I know they enjoy being on Sports Talk, and we get a chance to take the show to them.
The one I think who has probably the biggest binoculars or periscope or any kind of spotlight on him is the man you mentioned, Josh Conklin at Wofford. You have to live up to the kind of winning tradition that Mike Ayers had there at that program. Second round of the postseason last year, the victory over Furman, getting themselves over that hump there. To me, that is one where you have to kind of step into a situation and really take the baton, if you will, from Mike Ayers. And I think that could present an opportunity for some of the other schools inside the conference, inside the state. Furman, obviously, thinking they could maybe supplant some of that real estate, if you will. It'd be very interesting to see how that whole plays out.
That's a good point. I think there's some pressure on Brent Thompson down at the Citadel, as he told us. Yes. As he told us in the interview, they got a little lackadaisical.
Yeah,
they had 2 really good years with Mike Houston, and then he leaves and Brent takes over. He keeps it going, back-to-back SoCon championships, and then they open up last year with 3 straight wins. They got it going again, and he said they kind of lost their focus, and he said he puts it on him. He kind of lost focus as well. So they got to regain that, whatever edge they had going. Listen, Mike Houston's a great football coach, and he's gone to James Madison and kept it going in a big way there. But Brent Thompson is the guy that orchestrates that offense. He had it at Lenoir-Rhyne when they led the nation in rushing all those years in D2, and he did it under Houston at the Citadel, and he did it as the head coach. As he goes into year 3, he wants to get it back to where they had it. He's got to start with a new quarterback situation there. And Citadel fans, of course, they enjoyed that run that they had, and they want to get back to that as soon as possible. So this is a big year for him.
Well, one of the things you miss, football coaches know this, if you start to get people's attention, you have to play better than you did the day before, because now people are looking at things they can take away from you, and you have to have a counter move. And I think the Citadel got caught in that. As far as Wofford is concerned, apparently they're getting a lot of respect, because according to what was the poll we saw last week, they were picked second to Samford.
Yeah.
So they think they're going to keep it rolling at Wofford. So
Furman would be interesting because, think about Clay Hendricks taking his team to the postseason, and whether or not you back that up. The home schedule for them, manageable, I would say. Western Carolina, Samford, Chattanooga, Wofford, but then you have to go on the road to the Citadel, on the road to East Tennessee, on the road to VMI and Mercer. It'd be different.
Love Clay Hendricks. A guy is just a great football coach, and the system that he runs, that he learned under Fisher DeBerry at Air Force, and he helped to continue along as the coaching changes happened there. He has brought to Furman and got them going offensively again after they were dormant there for many years.
Some hoops talk when we come back.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
800-956-7266. We'll take another couple of phone calls if we get them here in our last segment here on a Monday. Again, very busy week. Camp starting. A lot of football talk here with South Carolina and Clemson. We do have a basketball recruiting note involving a high-level prospect that has South Carolina on his mind.
This guy's got to be a Gamecock. He's just got to be. His name, of course, Kofi Cockburn. He's a guy that has blown up here in the summer. He's a big guy, 6'10". He's out of New York. He's going to transfer to Oak Hill Academy.
Get Sindarius on the phone.
In Virginia. Yeah, Steve Smith there at that big-time prep school program. So he has trimmed his list from 19 to 12.
Don't read them all. Please.
And South Carolina is on the list with Kentucky, Kansas, and Syracuse, Oregon, LSU, Pitt, Florida State, Illinois, St. John's, UConn, and Cincinnati. So this is the problem. I mean, anytime you're on a list with Kentucky, Kansas in particular, and you don't have any kind of family or state connection, even state connection doesn't seem to matter if it's USC or Clemson. It is just so doggone hard. You just can't beat those blue blood programs unless somehow, some way they take somebody else ahead of this guy. But this guy apparently is so good that you would not do that if you're Kansas or Kentucky.
But then if you're Frank Martin and you played so many foreign players and seeing this kid is originally from Jamaica, maybe you got a shot.
Kofi, can you imagine if he does come to South Carolina, what the marketing department could do with that?
Feel the Cockburn. You can see it already, you know.
That's so
okay.
That's so
all
bad.
kind of things you can say, and you know what? You're not breaking FCC rules because his last name is Cockburn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
From Cockburn to Cox recruiting as we continue here on Sports
my
Talk.
goodness.
This was something that was brought up by us. The state newspaper has done a thing on it. When it comes to the in-state recruiting, they took a real deep dive into the players who have left the state and kind of looked and saw where they've gone, what they've done, how they've fared, because the topic of in-state recruiting in basketball for South Carolina and Clemson, for that matter, has become a very hot-button topic with all these players who have left, and, of course, with the big in-state recruiting class of 2019 that is in here in the state. In my mind, Corn, outside of maybe Seventh Woods, Jalik Felton, DJ Burns, over the last 2 or 3 recruiting classes, is there anybody in your mind who you think has outperformed South Carolina and or Clemson, or at least outperformed what they would have done here?
Yeah. I mean, there are some that come to mind. I think one of those are first and foremost. Now, his situation was a little different because South Carolina was going through a coaching change during his high school career. His senior year, Darren Horn was taking over, and Clemson.
Oh, this is back. I'm not talking about just the last like 4 or 5 years. I'm saying,
I'm talking about Middleton out of Charleston.
Oh yeah, Chris Middleton.
Who went out to Texas A&M.
Yes.
Now he's become a big time pro.
Yes,
I mean he almost shot the Celtics out of the playoffs with the Bucks this past season.
Again, that's 2 regimes ago, though. I mean that's
yeah.
different.
But I'm thinking about. Are you just talking about here in the last couple of years?
last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean the players that have left the state to go elsewhere to this point in time, and it remains to be seen. Like you've got
we all know
kid
about
down in Ole Miss
yeah.
who did pretty well. Shoemate.
Yes,
I think he had a pretty good freshman year. Schuler. I'm
yes,
sorry,
yes.
Schuler, Devontae Schuler.
Yes,
he had a pretty good freshman year at Ole Miss, so I think he's showing up well. Haven't seen much from Seventh Woods, obviously. No, injuries have been a part of that, but I'm not sure if he's ever going to crack the lineup at North Carolina. Jalik Felton
going overseas.
Yeah, and he ran into some issues there at North Carolina, so that didn't work out for him.
The kid from Conway is going to Providence.
Have one going to Providence, and then you have
Burns. DJ Burns, Tennessee.
DJ Burns, Tennessee, and there was and you got one going to Vanderbilt, Neesmith, who will probably do very well there. He's a very good student, and he's a very good player, and he'll probably do well at Vanderbilt. These are all guys that they missed on one reason or another. But article in the state paper over the weekend by Andrew Ransbacher with Frank Martin, and Frank doesn't seem to be too upset about it. It's like, okay, you don't want to come here, then we'll just go and recruit somebody else. And Kerry Rich, who, of course, is very close to the USC program as a former player and puts on the summer league that just wrapped up. He wrote up something on the Big Spur, kind of reviewing the USC players in the pro league, summer pro league, player by player. And basically, he had glowing reviews for almost every one of the newcomers. He loves the Campbell kid as a point guard. He believes that he's a big physical type of point guard, kind of along the lines of what's his name? The Canadian that just left a couple years ago. Dwayne Notice. Yes. Likes him a lot. Loves the kid. Loves the Lawson kid from Canada. I mean, compares him favorably to PJ Dozier, his kind of game and his kind of size. You were there. You saw some of these guys play at the pro league.
I was there for the first day, and I got to tell you that the only thing I can do from a first day is to see if a player is mentally under control and if he has what I would call an agenda, a schedule. The first thing I was enamored with Trey Campbell was the fact that everybody knew his statistics in that Princeton offense at Georgetown, and he wanted to test his knee. Every ball he got, he was going to the hole. Y'all don't think I can play offense? Here we go. Then he hit a couple of tough.
But was there much defense being played against him?
Yeah. Because I think he played against Carlos Powell's team. And
see, that's the thing about the Pro-Am. This is not like an and one mixtape type league. These guys are grinding.
Oh yeah,
from what we understand.
And they had a couple of guys from overseas who played, pro ball, and those guys were stroking it, man. I didn't know him from Adam, but I said, wait a minute, this guy's. But then Trey Campbell hit about 3 or 4 threes in a 10-minute period. So I say this guy has proven he can play offense. Then rest of the game, he played point. He was taking control. The Lawson kid really attracted me because you notice how a guy plays under control, even though he's young. That's what he reminded me of. He didn't try to take over. He let the game come to him. Suddenly you saw a tremendous dunk off a fast break. Then he goes down the next time, strokes a 3 from the corner, then handles the ball playing the point some. So those guys were pretty much under control. The other guys are really kind of guys who have to develop.
Who was the guy you said was thick everywhere? Was that Frank?
Oh, Frank. Because I was telling you last week, even his ankles were thick. And he just
I don't like big men with thick ankles.
Yeah,
I don't either, but
I mean, to me that that kind of relates to slowness. You look at the big guys who are thin and can move their feet. Can this guy move his feet?
He can move his feet. But here's the thing. For every detriment you say about somebody, I'm going to find a positive. Because he has thick ankles, and say, for instance, you have Chris Silver in the game playing the high post. If he sets a screen to loosen Silver, whoever runs into him, they ain't going nowhere. That's how big he is. And that's how I was saying, if Buschamp had staggered into the Pro-Am, he'd have seen, wait a minute, I got another defensive tackle I can use.
Well, it's the other thing that I keep saying all the time. Finally, they have guys who are more than just bodies. Players who actually can contribute as freshmen, as intentional people.
But I will say this, the guy that they're counting on to come off the bench to play the point, TJ Boss, he didn't show me much.
I wouldn't read too much into the summer league positively or negatively.
But here's the thing. He comes out Wednesday when I can't be there, and he shoots 37 points.
Defense, how much being played?
No, but here's the key. 9 out of 12 from 3. I don't care. Nobody's going out that far. So, defense or not.
Everybody have a great night, and we'll pick it back up tomorrow night here on Sports Talk. For everybody here, have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.